Number the exile. The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord had stood for 3 million years. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang when light touched them. 12 species had built their thrones here, and from those thrones, they had ruled the galaxy in peace. They called themselves the Elder Races. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched young species crawl out of their oceans and reach for the stars. Most of those species were now dust. The ones that survived learned to bow before the Concord and accept their place in the great order of things, but humanity refused to bow. Ambassador Yellen Vasquez stood alone in the center of the hall. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind her, through the massive windows, she could see Earth hanging in the darkness of space. Her home, the home of 8 billion souls who had no idea what was about to happen to them. The Velthari High Speaker rose from his throne. He was ancient beyond human understanding, his body more light than flesh after millions of years of existence. When he spoke, his voice filled the hall like thunder. "Humanity has been judged," he said. "You have been found dangerous, too aggressive, too hungry, too unpredictable. You spread across your solar system in mere centuries. You fight wars over nothing. You destroy your own planet and then reach for others. We have seen species like yours before. They always bring chaos. They always bring death." Yellen did not flinch. She had expected this. The Concord had been watching humanity for 200 years. Ever since the first human ship had crossed into their space, they had watched with growing concern as humans built colonies on Mars, on the moons of Jupiter, on distant exoplanets. Humans did not expand slowly and carefully like other species. They exploded outward like a wildfire. "What is our sentence?" Yellen asked. Her voice was calm. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. "Death would be the simple answer," the High Speaker said. "But we do not kill. We are not like you. Instead, you will be relocated. All of humanity. Every man, woman, and child. You will be taken to a world at the edge of the galaxy. A world called Kethris 9. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Even they seemed shocked. Yellen had never heard of Kethris 9. But she saw the reaction of the other species, and her blood ran cold. "Show me," she said. The High Speaker waved his hand, and an image appeared in the air above them. It was a planet, but not like any planet Yellen had ever seen. The surface was gray and brown, scarred by ancient cataclysms. Yellow clouds covered the sky, thick with poison. There were no oceans, no forests, no signs of life. It looked like a wound in space. It looked like death. "Kethris 9, the High Speaker said. "A Class 7 death world. The atmosphere is toxic. The soil is poison. Radiation storms sweep the surface every few days. No species has ever survived there for more than 3 generations. We call it the Grave World." Yellen stared at the image. She understood now. The Concord was not showing mercy. They were simply killing humanity slowly instead of quickly. They would dump 8 billion people on a dead rock and wait for nature to finish the job. Their hands would remain clean. "You will be given supplies," the High Speaker continued. "Enough for 5 years, perhaps. Ark ships will transport your people. The journey will take 6 months. After that, you will never leave Kethris 9. The planet will be surrounded by our warships. Any attempt to escape will be met with destruction." The other species on their thrones watched in silence. Some looked pleased. Others looked uncomfortable. But none of them spoke against the sentence. None of them raised a hand to help humanity. Yellen took a deep breath. She thought of her children on Earth, her grandchildren. She thought of the billions of people who were living their ordinary lives at this very moment, not knowing that their future had just been stolen. "How long do we have?" she asked. 3 months to prepare. Then the Ark ships will come. 3 months. 3 months to tell humanity that everything they had built, everything they had dreamed of, was over. 3 months to pack up an entire civilization and prepare for exile. Yellen looked at the image of Kethris 9 one last time. Then she looked at the High Speaker. Her eyes were hard now, filled with something the ancient alien had not expected to see. It was not defeat. It was defiance. "We accept your sentence," Yellen said. "We will go to your dead world. But I want you to remember something. I want all of you to remember this moment. Because one day, we will see you again." The High Speaker laughed. It was a gentle sound, almost kind. "Ambassador, your optimism is noted. But Kethris 9 has killed species far more advanced than yours. In 100 years, you will be a memory. In 1,000 years, you will be forgotten. This is not a punishment. This is simply the natural order. The weak do not survive. Yellen smiled. It was not a warm smile. We'll see. 3 months later, the Ark ships came. They were massive vessels, each one large enough to carry 100 million people. The Concord had built them quickly, eager to be rid of the human problem. Across Earth and the colonies, people said goodbye to everything they knew. They packed what they could carry. They left behind their homes, their cities, their history. Director Amara Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the lead Ark ship and watched Earth grow smaller in the viewport. She was 43 years old, an engineer who had built space stations and orbital habitats. Now she had been chosen to lead something called the Survival Initiative. Her job was simple: keep humanity alive on a world designed to kill them. Beside her stood Dr. Nikolai Volkov, a xenobiologist with wild gray hair and eyes that never stopped moving. He was already studying the data on Kethris 9, looking for something, anything, that might give them hope. The atmosphere is 90% carbon dioxide, he muttered. Traces of sulfur compounds. Surface temperature averages 45 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels are lethal without shielding. Is there anything good? Amara asked. Nikolai was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, there might be water ice at the poles, and the planet has a magnetic field, which is unusual for a dead world. It means the core is still active. That could be useful. Amara nodded. Useful. That was all they needed. One useful thing after another, chained together, might keep them alive. Captain Jin Soo-yun approached them. He was the military commander of the fleet, a quiet man with sad eyes. He had been a soldier all his life. Now he would have to be something more. The last Ark ship has launched, he reported. All 8 billion accounted for. We are ready to jump. Amara looked at Earth one final time. She had been born in Lagos, had watched her first sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean, had taken her first steps on African soil. Now she would never see any of it again. Then let's go, she said. Let's go find out what we're made of. The Ark ships jumped to faster than light speed, and Earth disappeared from view. 6 months later, they arrived at Kethris 9. The planet hung before them, ugly and hostile, wrapped in its yellow clouds like a diseased thing. On every ship, 8 billion humans looked at their new home through viewports and screens. Many wept. Some screamed. A few simply stared in silence, their faces empty. But Amara Okonkwo looked at Kethris 9 and saw something else. She saw rock that could be mined. She saw an atmosphere that could be changed. She saw a challenge that demanded everything humanity had. All ships, she said into the fleet-wide communication system. Begin landing procedures. We have work to do. The first shuttles began their descent toward the dead world below. Humanity's exile had begun. But their story was just starting. Number the first decade. The first year on Kethris 9 was a nightmare. Within the first week, 3,000 people died from radiation exposure. The shielding on the temporary shelters was not strong enough. The yellow clouds above them were filled with particles that burned through skin and lungs. People coughed blood and fell down and did not get up again. Amara Okonkwo worked 20 hours a day. She barely slept. She ate when someone forced food into her hands. She stood in the command center of the largest shelter and made decisions that would save some lives and end others. We need to go underground, she announced at the emergency council meeting. The surface is too dangerous. We have to dig. The council members looked at her with exhausted eyes. They were engineers, doctors, soldiers, scientists. They had been the best of humanity back on Earth. Now they were refugees on a dying world. Dig with what? One of them asked. The soil is toxic. Our drilling equipment was designed for normal rock. This planet's crust is laced with heavy metals that destroy our machines. Then we build new machines, Amara said. We adapt. That is what humans do. They dug. For 6 months, every able-bodied person worked in shifts. They carved tunnels into the rock beneath the surface. They built chambers and corridors and halls. They sealed the walls with materials made from local minerals. They created air filtration systems from scratch. People died every day. The radiation claimed some. Accidents claimed others. Some simply gave up hope and walked out into the yellow storms. Their bodies were never recovered. But slowly, the underground cities took shape. Dr. Nikolai Volkov spent most of his time in a small laboratory he had built from salvaged equipment. He was searching for life on Kethris 9. Everyone told him he was wasting his time. The planet was dead. Nothing could survive here. Nikolai did not listen to them. One night, while drilling through rock 3 kilometers below the surface, his team found something. It was a thin layer of moisture between 2 rock formations. In that moisture were bacteria. They were tiny, strange, unlike anything from Earth, but they were alive. Nikolai burst into Amara's office at 3 in the morning, his face covered with dirt and his eyes wild with joy. "Life," he said, holding up a small container. "Extremophile bacteria. They survive on heat from the planet's core. They eat minerals and produce organic compounds. The planet is not dead. It is sleeping." Amara stared at the container. Such a small thing. Such a fragile thing. But in that moment, she felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. "Can we use them?" she asked. "I believe so. If we can modify them, combine them with Earth organisms, we might be able to create plants that can grow here. It will take years, maybe decades, but it is possible." Amara put her hand on his shoulder. "Then get to work." The years passed. By the end of year 2, the underground cities housed most of humanity. The surface was still deadly, but below the rock, people were building something new. They created farms using artificial lights. They grew algae in tanks for food. They recycled every drop of water, every scrap of waste. Captain Jin Soo-yoon kept order among the people. Crime was rare because everyone understood that survival required cooperation. Those who stole food or attacked others were not imprisoned. They were simply sent to the surface. No one stole twice. Jin walked through the tunnels every day, talking to people, listening to their fears and hopes. He was not a cruel man. He understood that desperation could turn good people into monsters. His job was to prevent that transformation. "How long can we last like this?" a young woman asked him once. She had been an artist on Earth. Now she worked in the water recycling plant. "Are we just waiting to die slowly?" Jin thought carefully before answering. "I don't know how long we can last," he said honestly. "But I know that every day we survive is a victory. Every child that is born is a victory. Every problem we solve is a victory. Maybe that is enough." The woman nodded slowly. It was not the answer she wanted, but it was an answer she could live with. Meanwhile, far away on the Concord's capital world, a young Velthari scholar named Selenith received an unusual assignment. He was to monitor the human settlement on Kethris 9 and document their extinction. "How long do you expect this to take?" he asked his superiors. 3 generations at most," they told him. "The planet has never failed to kill. But we must have proper records. The other young species need to know what happens to those who threaten the Concord." Selenith traveled to a monitoring station near Kethris 9 and began his observations. He expected to watch a slow tragedy unfold. What he saw instead confused him. The humans were not dying out. They were organizing, building, adapting. He watched them dig their underground cities. He watched them create farms and caves. He watched them care for their sick and bury their dead, and then go back to work the next day. He filed his first report. Humans display unexpected resistance to environmental challenges. Mortality rates high but stable. Recommend continued observation. His superiors dismissed the report. All species fought against death at first. The humans would break eventually. They always did. Year 7 brought the first real miracle. Dr. Volkov and his team of geneticists had spent 5 years modifying Earth plants to survive in Kethris 9's toxic soil. They had failed hundreds of times. Thousands of experiments had ended in dead seedlings and bitter disappointment. But on a morning in the 7th year, a young botanist named Sarah Chen ran through the tunnels screaming with joy. She burst into Amara's office and grabbed the director by the arm. "Come," she said. "You have to see this." Amara followed her to an experimental chamber near the surface. The radiation was still dangerous here, but they wore protective suits. They climbed through a tunnel that led to a small cavern that opened to the sky, and there, in a field of gray soil under the yellow clouds, wheat was growing. It was not much, perhaps an acre of thin, struggling stalks. The wheat had been modified so heavily that it barely resembled earth wheat anymore. Its leaves were thick and dark, designed to resist radiation. Its roots were deep, reaching for moisture far below. It was ugly and strange, but it was alive. It was growing. It would produce grain that humans could eat. Amara Okonkwo fell to her knees in the toxic soil and wept. That night, she ordered a celebration throughout all the underground cities. The first harvest would not come for months, but that did not matter. What mattered was that they had proven something. They could grow food on this dead world. They could make life where there had been none. People gathered in the great halls and shared what little food they had. Musicians played songs from Earth. Children danced and laughed. For one night, 8 billion humans remembered what joy felt like. When the harvest finally came, the grain was tough and bitter. But Amara ordered bread to be baked from it and distributed to every person in every city. People tasted it and some cried and some laughed and some just sat in silence, chewing slowly. It was the worst bread any of them had ever eaten. It was also the most important. By year 10, the population had stabilized at 6.2 billion. They had lost nearly 2 billion people to radiation, to accidents, to disease, to despair. Every family had lost someone. The grief was heavy on them like a weight they would carry forever. But they were no longer dying. Selenith the Watcher sent another report to the Concord. Human population decline has halted. Underground infrastructure now supports long-term habitation. Recommend reassessment of timeline. The Concord noted his report and filed it with the others. An anomaly, they decided. Temporary. The planet would claim them eventually. It always did. But in the underground cities of Kethris 9, humanity was not thinking about extinction. They were thinking about the future. They were making plans. They were planting more fields. They were just getting started. The terraforming. 50 years after the exile, a child was born in the underground city of New Lagos. Her name was Destiny Okonkwo, and she was the great-granddaughter of director Amara. When she opened her eyes for the first time, she did not cry. She looked around the room with curious dark eyes, as if she was trying to understand this strange world she had entered. Her mother held her up to a small window cut into the rock. Through that window, you could see the surface of Kethris 9. The yellow clouds still covered the sky, but they were thinner now, and in the distance, you could see something that had not existed 50 years ago. Trees. They were not beautiful trees. They were twisted and dark, with thick bark and small leaves. They had been designed in laboratories, combining the DNA of earth plants with the extremophile bacteria that Nikolai Volkov had discovered so long ago. These trees could survive the radiation. They could grow in poisoned soil. They could breathe toxic air and release oxygen. They were ugly, but they were changing the world. Director Amara had died 5 years earlier, at the age of 94. But before she died, she had seen the first forests planted. She had walked among the twisted trees and touched their rough bark and smiled. "We're not done yet," she had said. Those were her last words. Now humanity was continuing her work on a scale she could never have imagined. Atmosphere processors dotted the landscape like giant mushrooms. They were machines as tall as buildings, sucking in the poisonous air and breaking it down into its parts. They released oxygen and nitrogen, and captured the toxic elements for disposal. Day and night, they worked without stopping. Year after year, the air slowly changed. The Great Oceans Project began in year 35. Engineers identified massive deposits of ice at the northern and southern poles. They built machines to harvest this ice and carry it to low-lying regions. They melted it into artificial basins carved from the rock. At first, the water was dead and gray, but scientists seeded it with engineered algae, tiny organisms that could survive the harsh conditions. The algae multiplied and spread, and turned the water blue-green. They released oxygen into the air and created the foundation for more complex life. By year 50, Kethris 9 had its first ocean. They called it the Sea of New Hope. People gathered on its shores and stared in wonder. Many of the older generation had memories of Earth's oceans, blue and endless and filled with life. This new ocean was small and strange, but it was theirs. They had made it themselves. Children splashed in the shallow water and laughed. Their laughter echoed across a landscape that had been silent for millions of years. Dr. Volkov did not live to see the ocean. He had died in year 22, worn out by decades of work and radiation exposure. But his students and their students continued his research. They created fish that could survive in the new ocean. They developed insects to pollinate the engineered flowers. They built ecosystems piece by piece, like putting together the most complicated puzzle in history. Meanwhile, Selenith the Watcher grew old at his monitoring station. He had been watching humanity for 50 years now. He had seen things that no Veltari had ever imagined possible. He sent report after report to the Concord. The humans are transforming the planet. Atmospheric oxygen levels have increased by 3%. Surface temperature is decreasing as the cloud cover thins. Large bodies of water now exist in multiple regions. The Concord did not believe him. Your equipment must be malfunctioning, they told him. No species has ever terraformed a Class 7 death world. It is physically impossible. We recommend you return for medical evaluation. Selenith refused to return. He knew what he was seeing. He knew it was real. And he knew that the Concord was making a terrible mistake by ignoring it. In the 60th year, the first open-air city was built. It rose on a plateau near the equator, where the atmosphere had grown thick enough to breathe without assistance. Not everyone could live there yet. The air was thin, and people from the underground cities sometimes got sick when they visited. But it was a beginning. They called the city First Light, because it was the first place on Kethris 9 where humans could stand under the sky and feel the sun on their skin without dying. The sky was still strange. It was not the blue of Earth, but a pale greenish color, like copper patina. The sun looked different through the remaining clouds, but people stood in the streets of First Light and looked up at that alien sky and wept with joy. Amara's grandson, Thomas Okonkwo, was the governor of First Light. He was 60 years old, born on Kethris 9, raised in the underground cities. He had never seen Earth except in pictures and videos, but he carried his grandmother's determination in his bones. She would be proud, his wife said to him, as they watched the sunset from their balcony. Thomas nodded slowly. She would say, "We're not done yet." And she would be right. We have a whole planet to wake up. The forests continued to spread. By year 75, they covered 15% of the planet's surface. Scientists had created hundreds of new species, each one designed for a specific purpose. Some trees pulled heavy metals from the soil. Others produced fruits that humans could eat. Still others provided wood for building. Animals came next. Engineers created hardy creatures that could survive in this new environment. They started with simple things, insects and worms that would break down dead plants and enrich the soil. Then came larger animals, engineered versions of rabbits and deer and wolves. The ecosystem was artificial, designed in laboratories rather than evolved over millions of years. But it worked. Life spread across the surface of Kethris 9 like a slow green wave, and something unexpected began to happen. The children born in the surface cities were different. It was subtle at first. They did not get sick from radiation as easily as their parents. Their lungs seemed better adapted to the thin air. They were stronger, tougher, more suited to this harsh world. Doctors studied them and found remarkable changes. The human body was adapting to Kethris 9. Generations of living under harsh conditions had triggered something in human DNA. People were becoming more resistant to radiation. Their bones were growing denser to handle the planet's slightly higher gravity. Their bodies were changing. Humanity was evolving. By year 75, the population had grown to 9 billion. More people lived on the surface now than underground. The cities were expanding, spreading across the transformed landscape. Farms covered millions of acres, producing food that no longer tasted strange. And in the skies above Kethris 9, the Concord's warships still circled in their eternal patrol. They had been there for 75 years, waiting for humanity to die. The crews had been rotated hundreds of times. The mission had become routine, boring, pointless. The captains of those ships watched the planet below with growing unease. They saw the forests and the oceans and the cities. They saw the lights of human civilization spreading like stars across the night side of the world. They sent their own reports to the Concord. Something is happening here. Something impossible. But the Concord was ancient and slow and did not like to change its mind. They had decided that humanity would die. Therefore, humanity would die. The evidence of their own eyes must be wrong. Selenith the Watcher grew weaker with age, but he would not stop his observations. He knew that someday, the Concord would have to face the truth. He wanted to be there when it happened. "They are not dying," he wrote in his final report, his hands trembling with age. "They are being reborn. I was sent to watch an extinction. Instead, I am watching a resurrection. The Conquered must prepare, because one day, these humans will come back to us. And when they do, they will not be the same species we exiled." He died at his station, still watching, still wondering what humanity would become. And on the surface of Kethris 9, a new generation looked up at the stars and remembered where they had come from. They did not forget Earth. They did not forget the Concord. They did not forget that they had been sent here to die. But they were no longer interested in dying. They were interested in living. They were interested in growing. They were interested in becoming something new. The terraforming continued. Year after year, decade after decade. The yellow clouds grew thinner. The sky grew bluer. The forests grew thicker. The oceans grew deeper. And humanity grew stronger. Number the blossoming. 100 years after the exile, a girl named Kira stood on a beach and watched the waves roll in. She was 16 years old, tall and strong, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to glow faintly in dim light. She had been born on Kethris 9 and had never known any other home. To her, the stories of Earth were like fairy tales, beautiful but unreal. The ocean before her was deep blue now, not the pale gray-green of her grandmother's time. Fish swam in its depths. Hundreds of species created by human science. Birds circled overhead, their calls filling the air. The sky above was the color of turquoise, still not quite earth blue, but close, so close. Kira's grandfather sat beside her on the sand. His name was Thomas Okonkwo, and he was 100 years old. He had been born in the underground cities during the first terrible years. He had seen humanity at its lowest point, and now he was seeing something that should have been impossible. When I was a child, he said, his voice rough with age, this planet was trying to kill us every single day. The air was poison, the ground was poison, the sun was poison. We lived like rats in holes in the ground. Kira listened quietly. She had heard these stories before, but she never grew tired of them. Now look at it, Thomas continued. Forests, oceans, cities, children playing on beaches. We did this. Humans did this. We took a dead world and we made it live. He reached down and grabbed a handful of sand. It was warm and clean, nothing like the toxic gray dust of the early days. He let it run through his fingers. They sent us here to die, he said. But we were too stubborn to die. And now we have something they never expected. We have a home. Kira nodded. She knew the history. She knew about the Concord and the exile and the terrible first years. But what interested her more was the future. Grandfather, she said, when are we going to build ships again? Thomas looked at her with surprise. Then he smiled. The same fire that had burned in his grandmother's eyes was burning in his great-great-granddaughter's eyes. Soon, he said. Very soon. The discovery had been made 15 years earlier, deep beneath the planet's surface. Mining teams had been extracting metals and minerals to fuel the growing civilization. They had dug deeper than anyone had gone before, following veins of ore through the rock, and then they found something that made them stop and stare. Vantrium. It was a mineral that glowed with pale blue light, so rare in the galaxy that wars had been fought over single deposits. Vantrium was essential for faster-than-light travel. The Concord controlled most of the known supply and used that control to maintain their power. But beneath the surface of Kethris 9 lay more Vantrium than anyone had ever seen. The entire planet sat on top of the largest deposit in the galaxy. The Concord had never bothered to scan for it because they never imagined anyone would survive long enough to go looking. The discovery changed everything. Humanity had been content to transform their world and build their civilization in exile. But now they had the power to do more. They had the resource that could take them back to the stars. The shipyards were built in orbit around Kethris 9. They were visible from the surface at night, bright points of light moving slowly across the sky. People would look up and point and wonder what was coming. Inside those shipyards, a new fleet was taking shape. These were not the desperate arc ships that had brought humanity to this world. These were something else. Warships with weapons designed by engineers who had spent a century solving impossible problems. Exploration vessels with engines powered by Vantrium. Trading frigates built to carry goods across the galaxy. Humanity was preparing to return. Maya Vasquez was 30 years old when she was chosen to command the flagship. She was the great-granddaughter of Ambassador Yellen Vasquez, the woman who had stood before the Concord and promised that humanity would return. Maya had her ancestors' fierce eyes and steady voice. The ship was named the HSS Okonkwo, in honor of the woman who had led humanity through the darkest years. It was the largest vessel ever built by human hands, a mountain of metal and crystal and light. 100 smaller ships would follow it to the stars. Maya stood on the bridge and looked at her crew. They were young, most of them, born on Kethris, 9 after the transformation. They had never known the underground cities or the radiation storms or the years of hunger. But they carried the memory of those times in their blood. "In 3 days we launch," she said. "In 3 days, we go back to face the ones who tried to kill us." The crew was silent, waiting. "I know what you're thinking," Maya continued. "You're thinking about revenge. You're thinking about making them pay for what they did to our ancestors. And I understand that. I feel it too." She paused and looked out the viewport at the planet below. Kethris 9 was beautiful now, wrapped in blue oceans and green continents. Clouds drifted across its surface, white and soft. Nothing like the poisonous yellow of the early days. "But revenge is not why we're going," she said. "We're going because we have something the galaxy needs. We know how to take dead worlds and make them live. We know how to survive the impossible. That is our gift. That is what we're going to offer them." A young officer raised his hand. "Captain, what if they attack us?" Maya smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then we'll show them what 100 years of fighting against death has taught us. We didn't just survive Kethris 9. We conquered it. A species that can defeat a planet is not easily threatened." Far away, on the Concord's capital world, Selenith's successor sent an emergency message to the council. His name was Voreth, and he had been watching humanity for 30 years. He had seen the ships being built. He had seen the fleet assembling. "They are coming," he said, his voice trembling. 100 vessels, possibly more. They have Vantrium, endless amounts of it. They have weapons we cannot identify. The humans are coming back." The council convened for the first time in 10,000 years. 12 species sat in their ancient thrones and argued about what to do. Some wanted to attack immediately, to destroy the human fleet before it could leave Kethris 9. Others wanted to negotiate, to welcome humanity back as a member species. Still others wanted to flee, to evacuate their homeworlds before the humans arrived. The Velthari High Speaker, ancient beyond measure, listened to all of them. Then he raised his hand for silence. "We made a mistake," he said. His voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. "We sent them to die, and instead we taught them to live anywhere. We tried to break them, and instead, we made them unbreakable. Now we must face what we created. What do we do?" someone asked. The High Speaker was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "We wait. We see what they want, and we hope that they are better than we were." On Kethris 9, now called New Eden by its people, 12 billion humans prepared for the fleet's departure. This was the day they had been waiting for, across 5 generations. This was the day their story would continue beyond this world. Children in schools learned about Earth and the exile. Old people who remembered the underground cities told their stories one more time. Families gathered to watch the fleet rise into the sky, 100 points of light climbing toward the stars. Maya Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Okonkwo and gave the order. "All ships, engage faster than light drives. Set course for the Concord capital. It's time to introduce ourselves." The fleet jumped, and in an instant, they were gone. Humanity was coming home. Number, the return. The human fleet appeared in the skies above the Concord's capital world without warning. 100 ships materialized from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They hung in space like a constellation of new stars, silent and still. The largest one, the HSS Okonkwo, was bigger than most space stations. Its hull was made of metals unknown to the elder races, forged in the fires of a dead world that humanity had brought back to life. Across the planet below, billions of aliens looked up at the sky and felt fear. The Concord's defense fleet scrambled to intercept. 300 warships surrounded the human formation, weapons charged and ready. Commanders shouted orders. Soldiers prepared for battle. But the humans did not attack. Captain Maya Vasquez opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship, every station, every world in the Concorde. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy, calm and patient. "This is Captain Maya Vasquez of the human fleet," she said. "Great-granddaughter of Ambassador Yellen Vasquez, who stood before your council 150 years ago. We have returned, as she promised. We request an audience with the council. We come in peace." The galaxy held its breath. In the great hall of the Concord, the council members gathered in their ancient thrones. They had not felt fear in millions of years. They had forgotten what it was like. Now they remembered. The Velthari High Speaker looked at his fellow rulers. Some wanted to order the fleet to attack. Others wanted to surrender. All of them were afraid. We will meet with them, the High Speaker decided. One representative, unarmed, in the Great Hall. We will hear what they have to say. Maya Vasquez arrived by shuttle. She walked through the halls of the Concord alone, her footsteps echoing against the crystal walls. The same walls that Ambassador Yellen had walked past 150 years ago. The same walls that had witnessed humanity's condemnation. She entered the Great Hall and stood in the same spot where her ancestor had stood. 12 alien rulers looked down at her from their thrones. She was one small human woman in a room built for giants, but she did not seem small. Council members, she said, her voice filling the hall. I thank you for this audience. I know you are afraid. You remember what we were when you sent us away. You wonder if we have come for revenge. She paused and looked at each of them in turn. You sent us to a dead world. A grave world. You gave us poison air and poison soil and radiation that burned through our flesh. You expected us to die within a few generations. You thought you were solving a problem. The council members were silent. Some could not meet her eyes. But we did not die. Maya continued. We dug underground when the surface tried to kill us. We built cities in the rock. We found life where there should have been none. We learned to grow food in poisoned soil. We cleaned the air. We filled the oceans. We turned your grave world into a garden. She reached into her bag and pulled out something that made the entire council gasp. It was a simple flower. Red petals, green stem, roots wrapped in dark soil. It looked like nothing special. But the council knew where it had come from. This flower grew on the surface of Kethris 9, Maya said. Under open sky. In soil that was once poison. In air that was once death. This is what humans do. We take dead things and make them live. She placed the flower on the floor before the thrones. We did not come here for revenge, she said. We came here because we learned something during our exile. We learned that we have a gift. We can bring life to dead worlds. We can transform wastelands into gardens, and we know that you need this gift. The High Speaker leaned forward. What do you mean? Maya nodded. We have watched your civilization from afar. 12 homeworlds, some of them millions of years old, and 11 of them are dying. Pollution, exploitation, decay. Your worlds are sick, slowly failing, and you have forgotten how to heal them. You have been masters of the galaxy for so long that you have forgotten how to struggle, how to adapt, how to fight for survival. She gestured toward the flower. We have not forgotten. We spent 150 years learning to fight against death itself, and now we offer to teach you what we know. The council was stunned. They had expected demands, ultimatums, threats of war. They had not expected this. Why? The High Speaker asked. After what we did to you, why would you help us? Maya was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. My great-grandmother stood where I am standing now. You told her that humanity was too aggressive, too dangerous, too hungry. You said we would bring chaos and destruction, and you were right, in a way. Humans can be all of those things. She lifted her chin and met the High Speaker's ancient eyes. But we can also be something else. We can be builders. We can be healers. We can be gardeners. We see a dead world, and something inside us refuses to accept it. We have to try to make it live. That is who we are. That is what Kethris 9 taught us. She spread her hands. So we offer you our knowledge, our technology, our experience. We will help you heal your dying worlds. Not because we have forgiven what you did. The dead of the first years, the billions who suffered and died in exile. They deserve to be remembered and mourned. But revenge would not bring them back. It would only create more dead. She pointed at the flower again. This is better. This is how we honor our ancestors. By creating life instead of death. By helping instead of destroying. By proving that you were wrong about us. The council deliberated for 3 days. Some species argued against accepting human help. They feared that humanity would use the opportunity to take control of the Concord. They remembered the humans as they had been before the exile. Aggressive and unpredictable. But the Velthari High Speaker spoke for acceptance. He had read Seleneth's reports. All of them. including the final one. He had seen what humanity had become. They could have come with weapons and conquered us, he said. They have the ships, they have the resources, they chose not to. That tells us something about who they are now. Perhaps exile changed them. Perhaps we gave them a gift without knowing it. In the end, the Council voted to accept humanity back into the galactic community, not as servants or subordinates, but as equals, partners in healing the dying worlds of the conquered. Maya Vasquez stood before the Council one final time. My great-grandmother told you that we would see you again, she said. She was right. But I do not think even she imagined it would be like this. She expected us to come back as conquerors. Instead, we come back as gardeners. She smiled. Perhaps that is the greatest revenge of all. To become something better than what you expected. The first human terraforming team arrived on Veltharis Prime 6 months later. The Velthari homeworld had been dying for 10,000 years, its oceans polluted, its forests gone, its air growing thin. The Velthari had accepted the decline as inevitable. They had forgotten that decline could be reversed. The humans showed them otherwise. They planted the same ugly, twisted trees that had first grown on Kethris 9. They built atmosphere processors and water purifiers. They introduced engineered organisms to break down the pollution and heal the soil. It was slow work. It would take generations. But it was working. Across the Concord, similar projects began on other dying worlds. Human engineers and scientists worked alongside alien species, teaching them the techniques that had saved humanity. Dead seas began to fill with life. Bare mountains began to sprout forests. Poisoned skies began to clear. And on New Eden, the world once called Kethris 9, life continued to flourish. Kira Okonkwo, who had once sat on a beach with her grandfather and dreamed of the stars, was now the planetary governor. She was 70 years old, and she had seen her world transform from a death trap into a paradise. She stood in a field of golden wheat, under a sky that was almost earth blue now, and watched her grandchildren play among the stalks. Birds sang in the trees nearby. A river flowed through the valley, clean and cool, filled with fish. An aide approached her with a message. Governor, we have received word from the terraforming team on Veltharis Prime. They report successful completion of the first phase. The Velthari are calling it a miracle. Kira smiled. It is not a miracle. It is just stubbornness. That is what we do. We refuse to give up. She looked up at the sky, where ships were crossing between stars, carrying humans and aliens alike on missions to heal broken worlds. Far away, in an archive on the Concord's capital, Selenith's final report was displayed in a place of honor. The young Velthari who had been sent to document humanity's extinction had instead documented their resurrection. His words were studied by scholars of every species. I was sent to watch an extinction, he had written. Instead, I witnessed something I have no name for. They took death and turned it into life. They took exile and turned it into purpose. They took hatred and turned it into healing. I do not know what to call such a species. I only know that the galaxy will never be the same. And in the fields of New Eden, children who had never known hunger or fear, or the poison air of the early years, ran through the wheat and laughed at the simple joy of being alive. Their great-great-great-grandparents had been sent to die on a dead world, but humans had made it thrive and prosper. And now they were teaching the galaxy to do the same.